Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. I am your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome someone who is giving back a lot to senior citizens in this country, Mr. Pankaj Mehrotra. Pankaj, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on your webcast, sir. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Pankaj is an elderly care advisor. He's consulting for senior living, which includes assisted living, old age homes, and retirement homes. So, Pankaj, let's start talking about the elderly and the seniors. Help me understand what are some of the challenges and discriminations faced by the older people.
So, in my opinion, the first challenge is the gradual loss of independent living.
Mm-hmm.
Because aging cannot be defined at a particular age point.
Mm-hmm.
It happens over a period of time.
Correct.
The issues or the challenges which are there at the age of 60 or 65 drastically change when it comes to 75.
Correct.
And subsequently, 85 onwards, the challenges are faced differently.
Mm-hmm.
So be it the loss of mental faculty or decision-making capabilities or the physical faculties, the changes are actually the challenges which people face. Small things like opening a soda bottle, something which you took it for granted, or even like when you're holding a cup, the cup which you're holding, as you grow old, the hands start shaking. So even having a cup of tea at times becomes a challenge. So in general, I would say that two areas where the challenges are faced by the elderly themselves, the physical and as well as mental. Second challenge is, I think, from the society point of view. Society, somehow, the moment we call them elderly or old age or senior citizens, we think they're redundant. Though the thought process is changing now, the people are working for a longer period of time. But in general, we sort of outcast them and say that, okay, this guy is now good for nothing. So you are not a part of the decision-making process, or you're not part of the mainstream line. So I think these are the two big challenges which is there.
No, and you've outlined them so well. Pankaj, I'm 65, and I always tell my friends who are my vintage that I don't have a minute free in my day. And I'm extremely busy. So I just hope a lot of people will listen to us and our conversation. But moving on, tell me, what is the difference between senior living, assisted living, and old age homes?
Okay, sir. I'll tell you, senior living is basically the umbrella term used for any kind of a residential setup for the senior citizen or the elderly. Now, assisted living was basically a US term, because across the world, there are different terms which are used by different countries or the continents. Assisted living is more of an American term, which basically meant that activities of daily living, which basically meant more of personal care, is included in the package.
Right.
So if a person who's unable to manage his own, if he's unable to eat on his own, or it is unable to move on his own, or unable to go do the toothbrushing on his own. So a caregiver would come and support you for that period of time. Right. But in general, it is not a medical requirement. It is just the activities of daily living. Whereas the difference between India and US, Canada, and Australia is that Indians have always been on an assisted living mode. From birth, we are into assisted living. We have someone who comes in to wash our cars, our utensils. We are so dependent upon our domestic support that we are born with assisted living. So for them, assisted living was primarily of only this thing. And old age home is again a format of senior living, which is similar as assisted living.
Very interesting. So, Pankaj, when I was preparing to talk to you, I was reading that by 2030, India will have over 100 million people over the age of 60. Are we prepared to handle such a large number of people who are over 60?
So that is a very big challenge and a very valid point. In fact, I'll just like to correct you on that. As there was a recent study which happened, India is sitting at 138 million.
Oh, wow. Thank you for correcting that.
And by 2026, and another 4 years, we would be at 173. So today we are at 10.1% of the population.
Wow. Okay.
Is 60 plus, and by 26 we would be around 13.1%. So it will be a 30% increase in the population of the elderly, which basically means the rural and the urban elderly. And unfortunately, what has happened is the policies are not very conducive for overall development of the elderly. We are either focusing only on the below the poverty line or the EWS or little bit of pension of 500 or 700 rupees. But in the holistic way, the central government has to take charge and pull in the reins of the state governments, because housing is a state subject. Central government can come out with a certain amount of policies, but implementing them is a state level issue.
Correct. But Pankaj, one is the matter of say pension for the weaker sections, etc. But for a very large number of older people, infrastructure also does not exist. And when I say simple little infrastructure, we don't even have simple wheelchair ramps in most condominiums.
I completely agree with you, sir. That is where, in fact, I recently done a full review of some 500 pages of the Delhi Master Plan, Delhi Master Plan 2041. And in that, they have spoken a lot about elderly and people with disabilities. But again, it was more of thematic that we should do this and we should do that, but nothing has happened. So I compared it with the Master Plan of 2001. I said in 2001 plan to 2020, because it's a 20 years plan, 2021 and 2001, what has actually happened? What are the differences you have made? So whether it is the parks, you have to look at the places where people go, to be very frank. If you're expecting a person today in India, if you're expecting a person to move on his own and go to the railway station or to the bus stop, let's be realistic, it is not going to happen in the near future.
Correct.
So what we can do is the surrounding areas, the neighborhood areas, we can make them accessible. But even that, there is no monitoring mechanism. As an independent person on a wheelchair, you will not be able to move unless there is a neighborhood level monitoring committee who can pull up the local authorities or the local councillors and MLAs and say, this is what we want. And this is supposed to be a part of it. Because the government can't do everything, to be very frank. The population is so large, we can't do everything. So this is something which is, I think, has to be done with a genuine concern, because people or the planners, let me say, they don't foresee themselves as getting old. So then they do not really make policies to that level, which will impact them also.
Well said. Well said. So, I was in, if you look at some of the developed part of the world, even wheelchairs, motorized wheelchairs that elders can sit in and keep moving around on their own, we don't have the infrastructure for even that. You can't expect them to drive on the roads, and
no, definitely, sir. Definitely. In fact, I think disabilities and aging is not a focus area in general.
Well said. Well said.
And the allotment of the social welfare department's budget, annual budget, the allotment versus the percentage of elderly and disabilities combined together is not at all proportionate. We are more focused about climate change and other things rather than implementing the right infrastructure at this thing. But things are changing now. Things are changing. The developments are happening now.
Good. So another thing that is changing in our country is family support. For a long time, it was just taken for granted that as once elders got old, or once parents got old, they would have a child's home to be able to live in, or a support of a child, even if they were independent living on their own. Now that is changing very significantly, either because of the nuclear families that we've had for so many years, as a result of either children are outside India. What do you see happening to the elders, because there's no family support left?
So this answer I like to break down under two parts. We have a huge population which is living in the rural areas also.
Correct.
So the rural dynamics and the urban dynamics are very different.
Absolutely.
urban dynamics, from nuclear families, we have gone to sub-nuclear families.
Correct.
And because of work pressures or the market demands, definitely the elderly or the senior citizens are left alone, number one. And secondly, there is a gradual understanding within the elderly people also that they are getting prepared themselves, that expecting my child to sacrifice his career and stay with me is not going to happen now. And secondly, the lifestyle which the Gen X has and the elderly now is very different. So they don't themselves want to be either a burden to them, or they have their own independent lifestyle. So what people are doing is they're engaging more with their friends, and the travel has improved a lot. In fact, in India, if you really look at the urban seniors, they are traveling quite a bit. Earlier, it used to be the Japanese, the Chinese,
Correct,
and the Brits, but now Indians are also traveling quite a bit. So they are trying to cope up with this mechanism.
Okay.
Rural area is a little different. Rural area is, they still have someone there. One member of the family is always around to look after the fields, the farms, and the families.
Interesting. So the areas that you work in, Pankaj, with the elderly, what is the kind of support you and your organization are providing to the seniors?
So this we were started off for helping the development of assisted living homes in the country. For a long period of time, I worked with Helpage India, which is working for the poor and disadvantaged elderly. So the donors who used to give money to support the poor, they said, now we are also getting old. Who will take care of us? And since senior living is a relatively new concept in India, especially for the middle and upper middle class. So that's the time we decided, now the Helpage India decided that no, this is also a focus area. Elderly means elderly across all economic brackets. You cannot define that he's poor, so we need to focus more on him, and the middle class is so and so. So assisted living is something which we are doing. So we advise developers and people in general as to how to go about developing a retirement community or assisted living community.
Okay.
And also help individuals or people who are unable to really locate a good facility as to where they should put their parents.
Very interesting. So when you help to design a retirement community, what are some of the key aspects you must have to be able to help the elders who are going to come and live there, or seniors who live there?
So before the designing part, I would say the location is the most important.
Okay.
Across the country, there are good projects which have come up, but could not take off because of the location. The location is important for the simple reason of medical backup.
Correct.
No other reason. It is called the golden hour.
Correct.
In case of an emergency, if the hospital is not nearby, then it becomes a challenge.
Correct.
So that is the location part. Now coming to the designing part, besides being wheelchair accessible and wheelchair friendly and stretcher friendly, because those are common norms, and typical features like grab bars and anti-slips, skid tiles and lighting issues and color combinations. The overall designing has to be aesthetic. It has to be non-institutional. You are going to a retirement community or an assisted community. It has to look non-institutional at all. It has to give you the feel of a homely feature.
Okay.
So it is not that you put up a couple of benches and chairs and say this is a library, or you put up a little bit of a walking path and say this is a garden. It has a lot of thought has to go into it. Like for dementia, if a person who has dementia or Alzheimer's, and there is something called a dementia garden, which is in a loop. It's in a figure of shape of 8. I'm just giving you an example.
With you.
So a person, you can leave him alone, he can keep walking and he'll keep coming back to the same thing without much of a monitoring.
Okay. In fact, that was going to be my next question, that mental health is a challenge for a lot of the seniors, or some of the seniors. How are you as an institution preparing your centers to be able to cope? One, you just said that, the walking track is in the form of an 8.
Yes, sir.
But for people who've got mental health challenges, dementia and Parkinson's and a whole lot of others, uh, how are you going to assist them in coping?
So firstly, you'll have to understand where mental health problem starts from.
Mm-hmm.
One is a biological. In fact,
Right.
everything is biological,
Correct.
but primarily it starts from isolation, neglect, and ignorance, I would say.
Mm.
Most of the times we are unable to detect mental health in the beginning stages. And when it's too late, we are unable to cope up with it, the family caregivers. So to intervene in this particular thing is, one is you need to reduce the isolation. That means you need to engage with the community. You need to bring them out of their beds. They need to bring them out of their rooms,
Right.
to get involved with. Second is to keep them active in terms of mentally stimulating activities. A lot of therapies are there, cognitive therapies are there, which help in keeping the mind active.
Okay.
And lastly, I would say tracking the mental health is the more important thing, which can help caregivers cope up better.
Okay. Well said. There's another challenge that I was reading about, which is security for elders. And I'm told that technology is now being used extensively to give security to elders. I'd love to get your perspective.
In security, in terms of, you're talking of physical security, sir? Or?
Yeah, I mean, they've got devices available in different homes, which are connected to some local center. So if something happens.
Yes, sir. This smart technologies are actually going to become the future of independent living, I would say.
Okay.
A lot of private organized firms have come up with it. In fact, Government of India has also recently promoted this assisted devices. The entire gambit comes under the assistive technologies.
Okay.
Be it monitoring vital monitoring of the body functions like blood pressure, ECG, and weight, and fall preventions. Everything is being done online now.
Okay.
We don't need to go to the doctor for every small thing.
I see.
So that is one part of it. Second part of it is the physical security, and these which is being monitored by the CCTV cameras, long distance cameras, as well as fall preventions. Fall prevention is a very big issue.
Correct.
So that is something which is there. Then is the medication reminders. Because generally, typically, elderly tend to forget which medicine they have taken and when they have taken.
Yeah.
So security in terms of both physical as well as social security and the medical security, it is definitely the future which is going to creep into our houses without our even knowing it. Today, the mobile phone is more of a laptop than
Correct.
And more of a medical emergency device than what it used to be earlier.
Yeah. Well said. So I've got time for two more questions, Pankaj. My next question to you is the role that the children of these seniors are playing. A very large number of people who I know have children living outside India.
Yes.
And when I speak to some of them, there is a lot of guilt associated because culturally they've been used to saying we look after our parents.
Very true.
What is your understanding based on, I'm sure, discussions you've had with many, to say, my parents are there, why don't you put them in a living, in one of your centers, etc. How are they coping with this so-called guilt?
So to be honest, guilt is very much there. But then it is guilt versus the next generation, I would say. The balance has to be seen. And the majority of the parents who are living in these kind of assisted living facilities are basically from the NRIs of the daughters, not the sons. Majority of them, the children are daughters. So that is one.
Who probably are more caring.
Number one, they're probably more caring. And secondly, the system which we have in India it was always taken that the son stays with the parents and the daughter moves out. Correct. So there's a slight social and a demographic thing on that. And what you're saying is right. A lot of NRIs are abroad, but they are taking care of their parents. There is a set of people who don't care, for whom I can't say much about it. Absolutely. But the segment which is there, they are definitely very caring, and they are opening up their pockets for the simple reason now they're earning more.
Correct.
Earlier, in the beginning of their careers, they were not able to do it. But today, in general, most of them are doing well. And for them, even $1,000 is not much of a money, which can take care of a month's expense for any decent facility.
Well said. Well said. And Pankaj, my last question to you comes back to the pandemic. I'd love to get your perspective on how has the pandemic impacted the lives of the seniors in our country?
So pandemic has actually put them more into isolation. And especially for those people who are staying alone or as couples, because being elderly, being more prone to catching the virus. So they are the ones who have been affected the most, and the children of it. But the good side of it, I would say, is that they are getting more techno savvy also.
Okay.
And since you can't go out, so you are forced to look into your phone and learn new things online. Be it interacting for cooking sessions or joining some WhatsApp groups or getting onto video calls with your children or your friends. So I would say they put them into isolation, but at the same time, one segment of the people have pulled up and got to learn the ropes of the new technology also. So.
Amazing. What an amazing conversation I've had with you, Pankaj. Pankaj, on that note, thank you so much for speaking to me.
My pleasure, sir.
Thank you for talking to me at such length about the opportunities, the challenges the elders are facing. And I'm an elder myself. And
you don't look though.
No, I said I'm 65. But what I'm saying is that, I was able to relate with a lot of your responses. And I sincerely hope a lot more of the elders will listen to our conversation, because I think you have some amazing thoughts. Thank you so much and good luck.
Thank you for having me, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.